Real talk only, this show ain't for the fake and the phony. Nah, we speaking it boldly, I'll give it the way that God told me. Yeah, I follow his lead, ain't what they want but I give what they need. Not wanna compromise, never concede, cause I need the truth like the air that I breathe. My recommendation, if you wanna change generations, hit play, let's talk about keeping it real. We get it in these conversations, yeah.
All right, welcome to Candid Conversations. I'm your host, Aaron Cooley, and we are back with another solo dolo. Was listening to a podcast, sermon sort of thing, and he was talking about this idea of finishing strong, and talking about the idea or what's been happening a lot of leaders, giants in the faith, maybe you want to call them, giants in just culture, falling off. So both secular and believers of just kind of having something happen towards the end of their run or towards the back half of their run that kind of like negates everything that was done before. And it was a super bomb podcast. I will link it in the information below, but it just had me thinking about finishing strong. What did that look like? And at the same time, what does it look like to start well? God says that to finish the race and to not despise small beginnings. It's a both and. And I think sometimes we get stuck in one or the other, or we are so focused on the both start and the finish that we miss everything in between, the joy of the process. So I guess starting with finishing strong, what's that even mean to finish strong? What does it look like to do more in less time, to do more efficiently, to be consistent? I think really finishing strong is all about consistency. I would argue that being consistent is far more important than doing more. And I think that is the idea of finishing strong, that it's much easier to do something great once than to do something small consistently over a long period of time. And I think you can see as someone who started small, and as all things happen, when you are faithful over little, there is more that comes. That in the more, they got lax. There was a maybe thinking more highly of themselves, or a lack of accountability, or just not to being as cognizant to the situations around you. And so something I'm a firm believer in is know your weaknesses. Like, everyone wants to know where they're strong and what they're good at, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you know your weaknesses and you can admit your weaknesses, then you know what to stay away from. There is no need to pretend to be strong in those areas. It's just, that I need to be cognizant of those things. And I think when you're cognizant of your weaknesses, that's when you can not just learn your strengths, but you can actually thrive in your strengths. And all that to say, how many leaders in the past 5 years have we seen or heard about some scandal, or they die and then all this stuff comes out, or all the different scenarios that we've heard or you have heard? And it had me wondering why are so many leaders, why are so many people taking charge or leading the front falling away, and not necessarily falling away from faith or falling away from their gifting, simply not living outside the spotlight the way they do in the spotlight. So when your charisma is greater than your character, you will always be led to chaos sooner or later. And that's kind of what I think the trajectory has been for a lot of people. So the first question is why? Excuse me. Why is that the case? I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there is an expectation as people get on bigger platforms, they get higher and higher, people elevate them, that there is an expectation that they will perform to a certain degree, that there is something they're going to provide. And not only that, they're not just going to perform that thing well, but they also are living in a way that the way they perform conveys the same thing. And I think that is a fair expectation. And on the flip side, I think there is also a lack of grace the higher you go up, that it almost becomes the more prestige you have, the more accomplishments, the more power or authority that is given to you or earned or all the different things. There's a expectation that you can't fall. Like you should be more immune, possibly. I don't think that's how we word it, but it's kind of how we think about it. Like they should be more immune. But I think really what happens is we're all still human, and maybe we forget that, or the expectations of people believing that we aren't or we are different in some way allows that pride maybe to creep in, to fall away or to have something happen. And I think there is that lack of, for some people, maybe accountability, and with accountability, safe accountability, not just someone who will hold you accountable to a standard, but someone who you can do that safely with, where I feel like there probably is a number of leaders who did not have, maybe currently don't have, people that they can speak honestly to about just what's actually going on in their lives. And not that I'm living a double life, but hey, I've had just this thought, or I've been really stressed the past couple of weeks. I'm just feeling overwhelmed. Or hey, me and my wife aren't doing great. Me and my spouse has been struggling. Hey, the kids, I don't know what's been going on, the job, whatever. Life is happening to all of us. And I think it almost becomes more difficult or more nerve-wracking to trust someone the higher you go, because there's this belief that there's this belief that as you go to higher depths, there's less temptation. Like the world somehow just falls away. But the Bible clearly says that we are not of the world, but we still live in it. And so that understanding of maybe, one, give leaders more grace, two, accountability. So that's my ideas of why, or what might be going on. But I think also, how do you finish strong? Consistency. Because I think when you're constant in the, and consistency in the small things, because when you're constant in the small, big always comes. When you are focused on the big, small often falls through the cracks as you get bigger. So I think in the consistent foundation of things and not growing weary, I think there also is some who haven't even fell off. They just step down. They're just like, I've come far enough. Like I think sometimes we have had people who have fought the good fight for 40 years. Like that's plenty. Or let's take it for anything. I've been working for 30 years. I've been faithful. I've been all doing things. I'm done. I'm retiring. I have enough money. Get me through. I'm cruising now. I'm 60. That's plenty old enough. And there is this dichotomy of there has been work put in and there's so much value in that. And you're not finished. Like the race isn't finished. If you have breath in your lungs, the race is not finished. The job is not finished. Your being is not finished. Your being present here. It seems like some people check out when maybe they've accomplished everything they wanted to, or they feel like I have nothing else to offer. Like this is all I have to offer. But I think there's something about inconsistency. There's always something new being found. So that would be, I don't know, that has been some of my thoughts about that idea of finishing strong. And it also led me to think about starting well, or just starting. I know for myself, I think I maybe talked about this in my intro, but I'm a type of perfectionist in the sense of I want to do excellence. And in this day and age, it's easy to see people doing anything you want to look at people doing it, things you are inspired by or interested in getting into to learn, to grow. And when I do that, I see a level of excellence, but that level of excellence is also based off their level of resources, time spent, availability, knowledge. There's so many things that goes into their excellence, but it's easy for us to often look at someone else's excellence and make that our standard and say, if it's not to that level, I don't want it, or I don't want to do it. But that's not excellence. Excellence is simply doing the best you can with what you have now. And I think that's part of the starting well, or just starting, that do not despise small beginnings. And it's almost like it's supposed to start small. If it started big, if anything we pursued started big, I would, at least for myself, I would say it wouldn't last very long. Where I think it is in Deuteronomy, but the Israelites are 40 years in the desert, right? And God tells them, hey, here's the promised land. When you go in there, I'm not taking out all the enemies. Like, this is all yours. But if I just gave it to you fully, you wouldn't know how to cultivate the land. You wouldn't know what to do. The animals would die. Like, this is something completely new for you. And so there's a gift, there's a grace, there's a mercy in small, allowing yourself to grow into it, allowing your gift to grow at the pace of your actual ability, not just what you think it should be or what other people are expecting or what you have seen. And so I think there is something about just starting, and starting well means starting with excellence with what you have right now, starting with what you have right now. And the idea of being consistent in those small things. Because if it starts small, then that most likely means there's a bunch of small things you have to be consistent in. They're not the big things. They're not the platform things. They're the foundation things. Every platform has a foundation. And I think we forget that. We think it's just floating in the sky. And a lot of people want inflation rather than elevation. And inflation happens way quicker, but it also is a very quick drop. It doesn't take, you can inflate a balloon fairly quickly and it will skyrocket. It will take off. It doesn't take much to pop that balloon. It doesn't take much to just move the balloon on a different course. And even though it may be rising, it's not going the direction it thought it was going to be headed. And so I think there's a power in starting well, and a power in starting consistently. So if those are the two ideas, there's all this middle. And so if we wrote consistency across that middle, yes. And what does that actually mean? I think practically it means progress, not perfection. I think there is a point that we get to where maybe you feel like you made it. I've made it. And that made it can tend to be, in our mind, or at least my mind, a perfection of something. I have perfected this thing. This is the quintessential place that I'm trying to get to. This is it. But that's not ever true for any craft, really, for any pursuit, because there's always learning, there's always discovering, there's always more. And I think also in that sense of, oh, I perfected it because this is where I wanted when I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and I was looking, saying, oh, I want to do that. I want to be at that level. You reach that level and you stop. And I would argue that a lot of people, I would argue there are people who quit the race. They get in, they don't count the cost. They don't realize, oh, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And on the other side, there's people who just get complacent. So they still run the race, but it's like, I'm on cruise control now, I'm doing good. There's no further to go. There's nothing else to do. So I'm just I perfected what this looks like. I know how to get in and get out and get it done. And I would argue that both of those are detrimental. Both of those are harmful. So what does it look like to always progress, to have progress? I think is to fall in love with the process, not perfection. To fall in love with the process and not the outcome. Because I think so many people are looking at the outcome or the numbers or the things that are able to be calculated to give value to growth, which is, it's always great to measure growth, to know what that looks like, no matter what your profession is or what you're pursuing. But even thinking of leaders and them falling, there was a place that happened where they started small. They started with pure intentions. They started with a plan. And maybe none of those things changed, but maybe the consistency fell off. Maybe they got complacent, that they were still doing the small things. They still were passionate about it. They still had pure intentions, but without a progressing forward, those things become impure, in the sense of consistency is only as valuable as it moves forward. Like consistency to a means of moving forward. If it's just consistency for consistency's sake, that really is just standing still. And often in the pursuit of life, in doing this life, there is no standing still. You are either moving forward or backwards. So what does that look like to progress, to move forward? A lot of things. I think there's so many aspects to that, but it's just something I've been thinking about. And I think there also is this aspect of starting. What does it mean to start? I would say for some people, myself included, I started too late. It's too late to start now. I messed up too many times. Like I can't start on peer now when I wasn't peer. I can't start on doing business right when I wasn't before. I can't start this because I never went to school for that. I'm not smart enough. Like we give ourselves so many excuses to not start. But the best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is today. This is the time to start. This is the time to start. And I think when we think of starting, it's the step. It might not be the first step, or the last step. It's the step that puts us in front of other people, is what we often imagine is the start. So doing a business, the start of that business is when we sell our first product, when we start the website and it's up and running. It's the starting at the gym is getting in the gym, that first day in the gym, picking up the weight, got the plan, meal plan, all that. That is the start of what people see, but that's not the actual start. The actual start always starts in darkness. It always starts in the place that no one sees you, because it starts with a decision. It starts with, all right, I got to get in shape. I'm going to get in shape. Let me set this alarm. That might actually be the first step. Let me set this alarm so I get up in the morning. Or, let me throw out the ice cream in my fridge that I was planning to eat. There's so many smaller steps that is the actual start before our perceived start. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in this is where we want to be starting, even if it's not all the way to this person's level of excellence that we've seen, but really just realistically, we could start here. But it's like, but to even get to that point, starting is not here. That is a checkpoint. Starting really is all these super small things, the consistent things, the day by day decisions, then that moment decision to begin. So I would encourage you to start, and to start small, and to start consistently, and start adding from there, and to really think about, where are you trying to start? Is your start realistic? Is it the actual start, or is it a checkpoint that you want to be the official start for you? Because I think that often holds us back. Another thing that I think is problematic or hard for us is starting late, or I should say getting to the party late is, I guess, the phrase people would use, that it's like we have what we need, we're ready, dressed for the occasion, but I'm late. I'm one of the last people to the party. That sucks. And there is a timing to a lot of things. And you never know if that so-called last to the party is exactly the timing you were put to step into that. And to not despise people going before you. I think we get so caught up on wanting to be first, or to be trendy, or especially with TikTok and Instagram and all the trends and dances and all the different things, that's like, I could start that, or I got to invent something new. I have to give something new and be first. But I think there's something so powerful about, and even through time, how many times has someone had an original idea, but it wasn't fully thought through, or they only had a piece of the puzzle, and they just stopped because they're like, I don't actually have more than this. I know it could be something. And a year later, years later, decades later, someone else comes along, sees that idea, or has an idea like, hey, oh, I know how to finish that. This is what's missing. And that becomes the new. But it really was a collaboration because they still chose to start, even with things being oversaturated in that population. And I think there is, to know what to start, you must know what you're supposed to be pursuing, not just passions, but purpose. Are you pursuing purpose or passions? Because I think when you're pursuing passions, the same way you can be passionate about getting in, you can be just as passionate about getting out. It is often a hot and cold very quickly, dependent on how things are going. When it's purpose, it's not based on the outcome or the results, but simply on the calling. And so those are my initial big ideas for both those spectrums. And then in the in between, don't stop your trip because you tripped. Don't stop because you failed. Don't stop because you made a wrong step. Don't stop because you turned left instead of right. How crazy would that be if we're on Google Maps and it's giving us instructions and we get distracted or something happens? We're on the phone, or the kids are acting a mess, and you turn the other way. How crazy? What sense would it make to just stop the car there? Guess we're done. Made a wrong turn. No, there's a recalculation that happens that often adds some time, adds some minutes. There's a consequence, which is consequences are neither good or bad in themselves. It is just simply the result of a decision made. So yeah, the consequence might be, we got to add 3 minutes, or we got to do a U-turn and go back the same direction. But it is not a stop. It is a recalculating. Can you fall and recalculate? Can you trip and recalculate? Can you turn the wrong direction? And maybe you've been turned the wrong direction for a really long time and it just feels more comfortable. It's familiar to go this direction. You got to turn around. It's often the places we want to go, the places we feel called to, are going to be uncomfortable. I would argue they're always going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar, but it's going to fit you right. Like it's going to be like an outfit that fits correctly, but is uncomfortable because you never tried it on. You have to break it in. You have to know what this road looks like. And so, and that's something even I've thought about, like, man, but I've tripped so many times. I know I started, but I can't keep going. I've tripped too many times. I've fallen too many. And whether it's a fear of, I don't want to fall again because it hurts, or I don't want to fall because I'm disappointing people or people are judging me, but it's, no one has done this walk perfectly. No one has ran this race perfectly. And it's how sad to have missed out on all you had to offer because you tripped and you didn't want to get back up. Like I wonder how many people were called to greatness in their uniqueness of how God made them, that was never fully fulfilled because they got a quarter of the way, halfway, and tripped. And maybe tripped a few times and said, I can't do this anymore. But I think there is a part of loving the process is loving not just the success, but the slumps and the slacks and the falls and the bumps and the bruises. Like that's part of the process. It wouldn't be a process if it was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're good. Even when putting something together, if y'all ever went to IKEA, went to a good furniture store, got you something, and you had to put it together, it come with instructions. Not always detailed instructions, but it's going to give you something, right? It's going to give you some steps. There might be a few of you, but I would argue most of us have put something together and got to step 6 out of like 11, like halfway. It's going good. You get to step 7 and you see some pieces that you already used, or pieces that you threw away because you didn't know what they were for. And now you got to go back 3 steps. You got to undo what was did. You got to turn around. You got to recalculate because, I did need that piece. That piece didn't go there. What? How foolish, how sad would it be if we spent that time, that money, and that energy to start but to never finish, simply because we made a mistake, because we fell short, because there was a failure. It seems like common sense in all those scenarios, right? It seems like, well, why would you do that? I mean, all you have to do is just make a couple changes. Yeah, it adds some time. There's some consequences, some frustrations, but why would you stop? You'll never get to the prize. You'll never get to the end of the race. And I think that it hit me. That hit me hard. That I'm not of the old age, and I'm getting close to finishing the race, and I need to think about what it looks like to be consistent now. There's no wrong time to start being consistent. There's no, it's too late now. I've waited too long. No. Today, like I said, the best day to start was yesterday. The next best is today for all the things, whether it's starting or getting back up. Today is the best day to get back up. Don't stop going because it got hard, because you didn't know what direction to go. And sometimes that's what happened. Google will do that. You'll turn the wrong direction, and sometimes it don't just recalculate. It's like, oh, hey, I'm gonna need you to pull over for a second, figure this out. Okay, this is the direction we go. There's nothing wrong with breaks. There's nothing wrong with pauses. There's nothing wrong with not being sure of what's next. But there's something wrong with stopping, not pausing, because it often is when we stop. Stopping is comfortable. It's so much easier to get familiar with a place that you're stopped in. And when you stop in a place, you often get stuck in a place if it's not where you were meant to be. But if you're constantly not grinding, not on my 100 hustle, but simply moving at a pace of grace, walking to this place that you're called to, it's hard to get comfortable there because it's ever changing. And then you fall in love with, these people call it a runner's high. Never experienced it. The concept, I can't even say I understand the concept. Logically, it makes sense, but it still is a no for me. I'm not running no 6, 7, 8, 12, 40 miles. I'm not doing it. But the idea of a runner's high is there's a point that we're so far into this process of this consistency, of this moving forward, of not getting comfortable with what is and not stopping because that's easier, that it gets to this point that you fall in love with the process. It's not a runner's high that happens when you're done, like, man, I finished, that was so great. No, the runner high is actually taking place as you're running. You had a point, it's like your third wind. Like you get the first wind and then they call it the second wind, like, oh, okay, I'm feeling good. But there's like this next level that is no longer about, I would argue that the first wind is, okay, I'm getting used to this pace. I don't know what this is. The second wind is, okay, I think I can do this. The third wind is, I'm just enjoying the ride. That second wind is like, I think I can get to where I'm trying to go. But that third wind is, it's no longer about getting there. It's simply about this moment. There's a joy in the being. Like I don't want us getting so caught up in the start or so caught up in the finish that there's this missing of what's in between, the missing of the process, the missing of the being. And so for all the things, whether that's being a father, whether that's being a husband, whether that's being a CEO, whether that's working at Chick-fil-A while you're in high school, or playing a sport, or whatever it is you're pursuing, whatever you're doing in life, you have influence. So to tie this all the way back to just leaders, we all have influence. There is someone that is watching you at all times. And that is such a humbling thought that, and I would argue the older you get and the younger you are, the in between is actually where people are more cognizant of, I'm in the spotlight, people are watching me. But that beginning is like, I'll start whenever. No one's concerned about me. Someone's watching you. There's someone around you. There's a sibling, there's a friend, there's a coworker that's watching you because they see something, but it's been inconsistent, so they're confused. And then on the other side, you've been consistent for so long, you've been doing great things, But I think now, people aren't watching me the same way. I had my glory years. I had my, my heights. There's not much happening now. There's still someone watching you. There's someone seeing what you're doing, seeing how you speak, seeing how you act, seeing how you carry yourself and how you pursue things. And so there is, with that understanding of someone's always watching, how do you respond to the trip? How do you respond to the recalculation? How do you respond to consistency that sometimes is inconsistent? Do you get back up? Do you get back on it? Or do you allow the fluctuation to turn into frustration that turns into failure? Because the fluctuation can easily just be remedied, be fixed, and be recalculated. But how often does that fluctuation, that little, I messed up, turn into a frustration of, I messed up again, turning to a failure of just, I guess I'll just keep messing up, or I guess I just won't try, because it's so much better than messing up, so much better than disappointing people. But what would it look like to start small and to be consistent in that? Not just here, but here. Consistent in the small. Consistent as you get bigger, as your platform, as the people are listening, as the crowd gets bigger, as the influence gets bigger, as the authority gets bigger, that I'm still so consistent in the small, that's not seen in the dark place, that my character will always be greater than my charisma. That should really be the goal. Consistency is formed when your character is always greater than your charisma. Chaos ensues. Calamity, brokenness, hurt, tripping happens when our charisma wants to outrun our character. So what is your pace? What is, and I think the smallness, starting small, walking consistently in the small steps, is so that you can actually still judge truly and reevaluate, where is my character? Because sometimes we're tempted to run because it's right there. Like, I could just run to it. But sometimes the walk allows you to know, my charisma is ready for that. My character is not. My passion for this is ready, but my conditioning is not. I'm not conditioned for this pace. And so start small. Get conditioned. Get consistent. Stay consistent. And watch how your consistency of running a mile a day, walking a mile a day, turns into, I could walk 2. I could run 1, walk. I could run 1, walk 2. I can run 3. The consistency of doing will just increase because you're conditioned to that. So, yeah, that is just the thoughts of finishing well, starting well, consistency between the two, with that connection point of the testimony of being consistent. And even if your life started here and you're here in your life, this is where you start. This is your starting line. You didn't false start. There is no, I can't go back, so I'm not going to start at all. There's still so much to be done. Start today. Start now. Start in the small ways. What is that small? What are those small ways for you? And yeah, I want to hear what are your thoughts on finishing strong, starting well, being consistent? What does that practically look like for you? What does it not look like? What is confusing about that, or what is hard about that? Like, I'm just curious, especially from people who know they're in a position of leadership or influence. What has that journey been like for you to be consistent? What have you thought about now of changing, of maybe, I need to get back to the basics, or man, I've been too complacent? Because I think there's always both the end of just always being reevaluating and asking the questions, and even asking people around you, hey, what does this look like? What do you see? Because I think there's such wisdom in seeking counsel of those around us. Yeah. I think that's all I got for y'all. Peace.